When I was pregnant with my first baby, me and my husband did a lot of research and thought we had everything ready. Baby clothes, towels, baby seats, baby toys, parents' online classes, etc. But right after the baby was born, we quickly found out how difficult emotionally and physically it was to adjust our entire life with the newborn. First, we were exhausted for the 2 days at the hospital trying to learn parenting basics, changing diapers, learning breastfeeding skills from the nurses, and also sleep deprived from the endless feedings and baby crying. Every time after my daughter fell asleep in my arms, we were tiptoeing ourselves trying not to wake her up so we can sleep for 20 minutes if we are lucky. Unfortunately, she opens her eyes every time right after we put her into her crib. We tell ourselves it is probably just those first 3 to 4 weeks that we need to feed the babies throughout the night. Everything will go back to normal soon. And after those couple weeks, I was still up many times a night to feed my fuzzy baby. And things didn't look like it would change. We then surprisingly found out that many of our friends still fed their babies or toddlers throughout the night, even after they turned 2 years old. We soon realized that we couldn't raise a baby this way if both of us wanted to keep our jobs. So we started asking for advice from many friends and doing lots of research. And fortunately, 2 of our friends recommended the same book, and both their babies began to sleep throughout the night since they were a couple months old. With that goal in my mind, I managed to read the book and directed my daughter to sleep throughout the night when she was only 8 weeks old. I was able to do this without her falling apart emotionally nor crying it out. She's a very happy and healthy girl now. Our daughter's bedtime routine was that we put her wide awake to her dark crib, and she fell asleep all by herself with no crying. When I just welcomed my son a couple months ago from the hospital, I reread the same book, and my son was able to sleep throughout the night at 6.5 weeks old. Having good quality sleep is super important to everyone, and yes, including your babies. Without that, it is impossible to be able to physically and mentally function well throughout the day. In this video, I am going to give a very detailed summary of the book on becoming baby-wise, giving your infant the gift of nighttime sleep. Without further ado, let's get started. Home environment is super important to babies. This is an overlooked fact by many of us. Creating a home where parents love each other, keep dating each other, is essential to a baby's well-being. Both mom and dad should be intentional in their love for each other. Even though these little creatures can't say in words, they feel secure, safe, and happy under such an environment. Here are a couple of tips. First, continue life as the same after the baby comes. When you become a parent, your life might slow down for a couple weeks, but you don't stop being a wife, daughter, brother, or sister. Invite grandparents or friends to visit once life settles down. Keep dating your spouse. If you and your spouse had a special Friday night ritual, keep it. Having grandparents taking the kids for one time a month or week or whatever frequency after the baby arrives, so parents can date each other, is also another way to create a loving home environment. Most of us keep busy with kids and forget our personal life with our spouse. It sounds reasonable, but can also be a very dangerous thing in the long run. Eventually, your kids will grow up, and you and your spouse will be the ones holding hands together the longest. Only when parents love each other can they have a greater chance of raising happy and secure babies. Second tip. Parents having couch time with children is a very easy habit that families can stick to. Prepare some baby's favorite toys near the couch where parents talk about every day's happy, challenging, unhappy moments or what you have learned during the day. Last but not least, know what each other's duties are before your baby arrives. This is going to help minimize the stress a baby can bring to your normal home. Who will do what household activities? Wash laundry, fold it, put away, make bed, prepare meals, clean dishes, grocery shopping. Who will do the night feeding, diaper changing, etc. All the things that you do every day and every week. You need to assign it. Because when baby comes, you are both going to be exhausted, especially for a first-time parent, and you don't want the small things to make it worse. Chapter 2: Feeding Philosophies. In this chapter, we are going to talk about the evolution of feeding philosophies and introduce the parent-directed feeding, or PDF approach to baby-wise parents. Now, human touch is the baby's first language. This is another overlooked fact. Physical touch is as important as nutrition, and the lack of either will lead to failure to thrive. Children feel secure and safe through the physical touches and kisses by their parents. An American psychologist, Harry Harlow, was able to demonstrate the importance of early attachment and emotional bonds on the course of healthy development of monkeys through a series of controversial, unethical, and cruel experiments. His most famous experiment involves giving infant monkeys two different mothers. One was made of soft terry cloth but provided no food. The other was made of wire but provided food from an attached baby bottle. The experiment demonstrated that the young monkeys went to the wired mom for food only and preferred to spend their time with the soft, comforting cloth mother when they were not eating. The young monkeys constantly returned to the cloth mother for comfort and security. So, don't forget to give your baby enough touches and kisses. Now, the evolution of feeding philosophies. 1. Clock feeding. This emerged with the discovery of baby formula. This emphasizes environmental stimulus and ignores emotions and human nature. A constant schedule of every 4 hours is considered best interests for the baby. If the baby showed hunger cue sooner than the 4 hours, the baby should be left to cry it out. This philosophy emphasizes too much environmental influences on human behavior and ignores human emotions and human nature. We've already known from the monkey experiment that this is not healthy for the baby. Some of the disadvantages including, what about growth spurts? Growth spurts are common, and if hunger cue shows but not to the 4-hour schedule, the baby is not fed. If the previous feeding is not successful, the baby has to wait many hours to get to the next feeding. And the 4 hours is not enough stimulation for breast milk production. The second philosophy, child-led feeding. This emerged with the idea that children are born psychologically damaged from the birthing process. This is a very labor-intensive philosophy which says mom should keep her baby with her during the day and sleep with the baby during the night, and through constant and continual nursing to substitute the womb environment. This philosophy assumes the baby loses emotional attachment with their mother during the birthing process and that the birthing process was too painful. Therefore, it emphasizes too much on emotionally reattaching the baby to the mother and assumes every newborn has a desire to return to the security of his mother's womb. There's no life form on Earth in which the offspring spontaneously seeks to retreat to the past in search of an old attachment. Plus, the newborn has zero memory at birth, let alone the ability to recall anxiety that is specific to the birthing process. This philosophy is used by most people nowadays and has huge disadvantages, which includes hunger cues are not always reliable, as sleepy or sick babies will not signal for food for many hours. Fatigue moms and tired babies are huge disadvantages. Cluster feeding introduces excessive fuzziness, instability in sleep-wake cycles, which all contribute to infant sleep deprivation. Now, our parent-directed feeding philosophy. This is the one used by baby-wise parents. This PDF approach combines the hunger cue from the baby and the constant of time and is the middle point between the first two philosophies. The formula is hunger cue plus clock plus parent assessment equals the feeding time. This provides a huge advantage to prevent parents from feeding too often, such as every hour, or too little, such as every 4 to 5 hours for newborn, while also providing enough flexibility to the everyday life. When there's no hunger cue, the clock serves as a guide to ensure that the baby gets enough milk. When there's too much hunger cue, it prevents the baby from being fed too often to prevent maternal fatigue. This leads to the best outcome for both baby and mom. PDF babies achieve a comprehensive attachment in the following ways. Synchronize their feed-wake-sleep cycles into predictable patterns. We will talk more about the feed-wake-sleep cycle later in Chapter 3 in the 4 sleeping facts section. The order of the cycle is a key to establish consecutive hours of non-wake nighttime sleep. Babies are able to fall asleep with no rocking or nursing props under this philosophy, and they will be able to sleep through the night at least 8 to 10 consecutive hours. They will have a predictable nap routine and a high-quality wake times and adapt to self-play. They will be able to self-soothe him or herself and be comfortable with different caregivers. Chapter 3: Babies and Sleep. A baby's body develops faster during the first year of life than any other time. It is essential to give them adequate nutrition to help facilitate healthy growth. The extended periods of uninterrupted sleep is also equally important because babies grow during times of extended sleep. Healthy full-term babies are born with the capacity to achieve 7 to 8 hours of continuous nighttime sleep between 7 and 10 weeks of age, and 10 to 12 hours of sleep by 12 weeks of age. Some studies suggest that babies who sleep well at night make them become smarter children. The advantage of having the baby sleep in the parents' room for the first 2 to 3 weeks is limited to convenience for the nighttime feedings. Your newborn will need to be fed at least every 3 hours, so it is helpful to have the crib that is close to you. Now, please note that sharing a room after 4 weeks can postpone a baby's ability to sleep throughout the night upward to 4 months. So feed your baby, rock and love him, but put him down in his own crib before he falls asleep. Now, the primary sleep cue for people is sleepiness. Parents sometimes unintentionally create some sleep props which become the substitute sleep cue instead of sleepiness. Now, if you keep offering that to your baby will lose the ability to fall asleep independently. Some sleeping props such as stuffed animals are harmless. Some can be very addictive. Those are some you should try to avoid right after the baby was born. 1. Intentionally nursing your baby to sleep. With PDF, when the baby is placed in the crib, he is usually awake. Not tiptoeing, breath holding, or absolute quiet is required. He may cry for a few minutes or talk to himself, but he will fall asleep without intervention from mom or dad. 2. Motion and vibration sleep props. In the short and long run, putting the baby to bed while he is drowsy but still awake facilitates longer and stronger sleep cycles than if placed in the crib already asleep. 3. Sleeping with your baby. This increases the chance of suffocation or strangulation or SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. An adult bed has many safety risks for a baby, including suffocation from a soft mattress, memory foam, or soft bedding such as pillows or blankets. Next, we're going to talk about the 4 core sleep facts. Sleep fact number 1. Babies have biological needs to organize their own days and nights, but they lack the ability to do so Parents must take the lead and create structure and routine for their babies and for themselves. Therefore, parents direct the feed, wake, sleep cycle, and the order of those three activities are essential for babies to establish consistent nighttime sleep. The more consistent the feed, wake, sleep routine, the more quickly babies develop continuous nighttime sleep. The sequence of these three activities repeats itself throughout the day. Sleep fact number 2. The quality of the activity is as important as the order. Productive wake time is important. Parents also have to make each feeding a full feeding, and this is a key to PDF success. That means you should try very hard to have a baby eat a full meal. Newborns need to be fed every 2 to 3 hours, so sleepy baby or not, they must eat. The full feeding is super difficult to do as newborns always doze off while eating. It is very difficult to wake them up. My husband and I tried everything including scrubbing my baby's forehead, feet, and using an ice pad on his forehead or his feet. This was easier with my daughter, but with my son, it became super hard, and sometimes when I was really tired, I just gave up and I used a pump to pump my breast milk into a bottle and tried to dream feed my son. When you successfully make each feeding a full feeding, it will eventually lead to effective wake times, and that also leads to effective nap times and vice versa. A good sleeper is a better feeder. Next, I will provide some of the tips to wake sleepy baby. Remove all clothes except the diaper and hold baby skin to skin when feeding. Stroke or massaging the baby's face or forehead. Rubbing the baby's feet. Changing diapers. Be careful to burp a little bit before changing diapers, as sometimes babies are easy to reflux when put down. Talking or sharing your thoughts out loud with your baby. And just be creative. Some things might work very well specifically with your baby, and only you can find that out. Sleep fact number 3. Predictable rhythm of feeding times and baby's hunger mechanism. The digestion and absorption response to routine feedings with a metabolic memory, just like adults having 3 major meals throughout the day. Routine feedings encourage the baby's metabolism to an organized pattern, such as every 2 to 5 to 3 hours. The more consistency in the amount of times between feedings, the easier for the baby to establish feed-wake-sleep cycles. While on the PDF there can be flexibility of time between feedings during the day between 2 to 3 hours, it is super duper important to keep the first and the last meal throughout the day consistent. For us, we keep our first feeding at 8 o'clock in the morning and our last one at 11:30 in the evening. Anything in between, we make it flexible. It is best to measure the time between feedings by measuring from the beginning of one feeding to the beginning of the next. The time it takes for a feeding approximately 20 to 30 minutes, and the total wake and sleep time which averages 2 hours. Add them together and you come up with your 2.5-hour feeding cycle. A 3-hour routine reflects the same components but with a longer wake and sleep time. With those recommended times, you will average between 8 to 10 feedings a day in the early weeks. Sleep fact number 4. While it is easier for babies to digest the breast milk, consistent nighttime sleep can be accomplished with either breast milk or formula. Chapter 4, Facts on Feeding. This chapter we are going to talk about feeding. We already know that breast milk has many advantages when compared with formula. Some of those advantages include good nutrition value, good antibodies to help the baby's immune system, reduce mother's cancer risk, and help the mother get back to pre-pregnancy weight, and many more. Then, even after so many advantages to breast milk, why are a huge portion of mothers still quit breastfeeding and using formula? Perhaps lack of routine feedings which cause the fatigued mother unable to meet the endless demands is the best answer. Luckily, the PDF method helps you resolve those problems and help you breastfeed longer, less fatigue, and achieve the continuous nighttime sleep. There are surveys showing that a much larger portion of PDF mothers continue breastfeed after their baby turns 6 months of age compared with the non-PDF mothers. Let's dive into the PDF feeding facts. PDF approach encourages full feedings about every 2.5 to 3 hours rather than a cluster of small feedings. It is actually essential to work to achieve full feeding during the first 7 to 10 days and not be overly concerned about the clock, feeding routines, or sleep training. Full feeding instead of a cluster of small feedings is a key to PDF success. Key characteristics associated with a full feeding include the following: a sufficient amount of time to achieve a full feeding, 10 to 15 minutes per breast or 20 to 30 minutes for formula-fed babies is the minimum. Hearing the swallowing of milk. The baby pulls away from the breast or bottle when satiated. The baby burped well after feeding. The baby napping well. The key to efficient milk supply is proper breast stimulation with appropriate time, 2.5 to 3 hours between feedings. Nursing moms should drink 6 to 8 ounces of water at or around each feeding. Liquids can also include other beverages as long as they don't have too much caffeine. Nursing moms should also eat a balanced diet with fruits, veggies, grains, protein, and calcium-rich foods. As the baby begins to suck the mother's breast, the milk will transition from formilk to high milk. Formilk is diluted and limited in nutritional value and is the milk stored under the colored spots under the nipple. As babies continue to suck, oxytocin causes the cells around milk glands to contract and more milk is released. This high milk is high protein, high fat, is rich in calories and exactly what the baby needs to grow. Proper latching on the breast requires the baby's entire body, head, chest, stomach, and legs are aligned and facing mom's breast. The baby's head should not twist away from his body. Tip of the baby's nose is brushing slightly against the mother's breast, and the baby's knees are resting on mom's abdomen. After the baby is correctly aligned, the mom should take her nipple and stroke slightly downward on her baby's lower lip until the baby's mouth opens. Because the reflexes needed to suck, chew, and swallow are in the lower mouth, thus the nursing stimulus is found in the lower lip. There are typically 3 positions for nursing moms: cradle position, side-lying position for cesarean birth, football held position. Now, how often to feed? Researchers showed that babies prefer to be fed every 3 hours. Infants have natural inclination to organize their feeding into predictable cycles early in life. The 3 milk phases. First milk produced is a thick, yellowish liquid called colostrum. Suck, 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 swallow is a typical rhythm as the baby sucks harder to receive the colostrum. It is at least 5 times higher in protein, while lower in sugar and fat compared to the more mature breast milk that has yet to come in. It is also rich in antibodies that protect the baby from a wide variety of bacterial and viral illnesses. This also encourages the passage of meconium stool, which is the first greenish-black stool the baby passes. Within 2 to 4 days, a breastfeeding mother starts to produce a transition milk, which can last from 7 to 14 days. The content of this milk has less protein than colostrum, but an increase in fat, lactose, calories, and water-soluble vitamins. The transition milk is followed by regular breast milk, known as mature milk. A typical pattern is suck, swallow, suck, swallow, suck, swallow. The mature milk is made up of formilk and high milk. The fore milk is released first and generally thin in consistency and lower in fat content, but higher in lactose, satisfying the baby's thirst and liquid needs. High milk is released after several minutes of nursing. It is similar in texture to cream and has high levels of fat that are necessary for weight gain and brain development. Now remember that we talked about PDF work against the small cluster of feedings earlier in this chapter. Babies who take small clusters of feedings will miss this rich, high-calorie, high milk, which is good for their brain. So another reason to switch to PDF approach. Other facts. The very first nursing. Most babies are alert for the first hour and a half after birth, making it the ideal time to bring the baby to breast. An initial time of 10 to 15 minutes per side will allow for sufficient breast stimulation. After the initial period of postpartum alertness, babies love their sleep. See the previous chapter 3 on tips to wake your baby up for full feeding. Birth weight. Almost all babies lose 5 to 7% of their recorded birth weight, breastfeed or not. This is because babies are born with additional fluids and meconian stool. Do not worry about weight loss, as this is normal. Measure how much food the baby intake. 5 to 7 wet diapers every day after the first week. 3 to 5 or more yellow stools daily for the first month, and consistent weight gain are all good indicators for healthy baby growth. How long is a nursing period? 15 to 20 minutes per breast side, and then switch to another side. Others do a 10-10-5-5, offer each breast for 10 minutes, burp in between, and offer each breast 5 additional minutes. The second method is better if mom has a very sleepy baby. If you feel your baby needs non-nutritional sucking, a pacifier might be good without compromising the routine. Growth spurts. Even if the baby is receiving full feedings, additional feeding times are sometimes necessary because of growth spurts. A growth spurt occurs when a baby requires additional calories to store energy, and it can last any time from 1 to 4 days. Some believe growth spurts happen 10 days after birth, followed by 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 3 months, and 6 months. If your baby shows an increase in hunger cues, constantly waking about 40 minutes earlier from his nap with a good appetite, excessive fuzziness with a good appetite, then that probably means he has a growth spurt. Feed the baby during those times. Use a breast pump and freeze some milk in case of growth spurts, as this can be very fatiguing to the mom as well. Luckily, normal feeding cycles will resume, and the baby will nap a bit longer the next day after the growth spurt is over. Breastfeed or formula. The health benefit of a breast milk for both mom and baby is better than formula. But the disparity between the two in terms of nutritional value to the baby decreases substantially by 6 months of age. Between 6 to 12 months, the gap continues to narrow. While breast milk has many health advantages, formula will not doom a child to frequent infections, obesity, or low self-esteem. Whether formula or breast milk, make sure to take the time to sit and hold the baby to provide cuddling the baby needs. For us, we decided to breastfeed, but find the ready-to-feed formulas super convenient during the first couple weeks. Because I was exhausted from the birth tear and discomfort from the delivering process, I used the formula to give myself some rest. Be careful when you choose to do so then, as your breast might not receive enough stimulation and you might need a breast pump to stimulate the breast after you recover. Now please note, cow's milk is not suitable for children under a year of age. Bottle feeding. One huge advantage of this is that it allows others to participate in feeding babies. The only important thing is choosing the right sized nipple. A nipple hole too large will lead to baby drinking too fast, and as a result, excessive speeding up. A nipple hole too small creates a hungry and discontent baby. Do not feed bottles on your baby when he or she is lying completely flat. Do not put a baby to bed with a bottle. The sugar in the formula will coat the teeth, resulting in tooth decay. Hygiene considerations. Always wash your hands when caring for your newborn. Soap and water is better than hand sanitizer because soap and water removes dirt. How much to feed? The AAP states babies should receive 2.5 ounces of formula for each pound of body weight. If your baby weighs about 13 pounds, then approximately 32 ounces of formula in a 24 period is a good amount. Burping. Patting a baby's back in conjunction with applying slight pressure to his tummy forces the smaller bubbles to collect, forming one larger bubble that the baby is able to burp up. Bottle-fed babies tend to swallow more air than breastfed babies. There are bottles designed to minimize the intake of air during the feeding process. Babies tend to accumulate less air when fed in an elevated position. If the baby is more interested in sleeping than burping, placing her in the infant seat rather than her crib will help keep the milk down and eventually cause the air bubbles to dissipate. Elevating the head of your newborn's crib by an inch or two can also be helpful. Simply place a book or board under each leg at the head of the crib. There are 4 burping positions: sitting lap position, tummy overlap position, the shoulder position, the cradle position. Spitting up and projectile vomiting. Spitting up is a common occurrence with infants. When spitting up occurs because of motion, it usually signals that a baby has eaten more food than the stomach can process at one time. Projectile vomiting is much greater in volume, and very forceful, traveling 4 to 6 feet across a room is alarming. Although any baby can have about 1 or 2 projectile vomiting, routine episodes indicate a more serious problem. Baby pooping. Breastfed babies' stool is very different from bottle-fed babies, and it is important to observe it. Breastfeed or bottle feed, the stool should be soft in consistency. Breastfed babies have frequent yellow stools in the early days. The yellow stool has the consistency of small cut cottage cheese. After the first week, 2 to 5 or more yellow stools along with 7 to 9 wet diapers daily are good signs for healthy growth. Around 1 month of age, breastfed baby's stool will decrease to only 1 or 2 a day. By 2 months of age, it is very common for exclusively breastfed babies to go many days without a stool. Bottle-fed babies will pass firmer, light brown to golden or clay-colored stools that have a stronger odor than breastfed babies. Bottle-fed babies have 3 to 5 bowel movements a day for the first couple weeks. It will decrease to once a day or once every 3 days around 1 or 2 months. The color can be brown, yellow, or tan and have the consistency of peanut butter. Chapter 5: Managing Your Baby's Day. PDF is a 24-hour infant management strategy with parents establishing a routine to meet their baby's growing and changing feed, wake, sleep needs. This can be flexible, but routine must be established before flexibility is introduced into the baby's day. With your baby growing from birth up to 12 months of age, the 3 activities feed, wake, sleep continue throughout the day with some age-appropriate modifications. This chapter, we're going to discuss feed, wake, sleep changing cycles throughout the baby's first year, reviewing some guidelines with the 3 activities, and introducing some general principles governing routines. But first, we have to understand the merge principle. Merging happens because sleeping times decrease and waking times increase as babies grow. I will use the 2 sample schedules for both newborn baby and 1-year-old baby to explain this merging principle. Merging is managing the changing needs from one growth stage to the next. For newborn, we see the sample had 9 feed, wake, sleep cycles, while the 12-month-old had only 4 cycles. because as babies grow, their wake or playtime grows as well, and their need for sleep decreases. Then parents will merge the previous 2 feed-wake sleep cycles into one cycle, and 9 cycles becomes 8. 8 transitions to 7. 7 becomes 6, and so on. Eventually, your baby's routine becomes owning breakfast, lunch, and dinner just like the rest of the family members. How awesome is that? So those 9 feed-wake sleep cycles from the beginning are very fatiguing, but luckily, they're only temporary. The sample schedule here is for illustration only. Every baby is different. For example, your baby might start at 8 a.m. in the morning instead of 7 a.m. in the sample schedule. 9 cycles is an average for most newborns, but you might be lucky and have a baby who went right ahead and adapted to only 8 cycles. Or you could have 10 cycles from the beginning. Don't get frustrated. Again, those are only temporary. Some guiding principles to merging feed-wake sleep cycles. 1. Capacity versus ability. Parents can only drop a feeding when the baby has the physical capacity and ability to do so. As an easy example, a 2-week-old baby doesn't have the ability to sleep throughout the night, nor capacity to sleep continuously for 8 hours without food. Therefore, parents should not drop the night feedings. 2. Understanding the principle of time variation. Early weeks, the feed-wake sleep cycle length can be fairly consistent. Eventually, each cycle will take on its own unique features. For example, for a baby at 4 months of age, one feed-wake sleep cycle might be as short as 2.5 hours, while another might stretch to 3.5 hours. 3. Understanding the first-last feeding principle. There can be some flexibility to the first feeding time, but try to keep it within a 20-minute time frame. After your baby is sleeping through the night consecutively for 8 hours, the first and the last feeding of the day become the 2 strategic feedings. It doesn't matter if your baby is on a 3, 4, or 4.5 hour routine. All other feed-wake sleep cycles will fall within those 2 fixed feeding times, and thus they need to remain fairly consistent. 4. Understand the principle of individuality among children. All babies experience merges, but at different times. Some babies sleep 8 hours throughout the night as early as 6 weeks, and some not until 10 weeks. That is a big difference. But they might change again. By 12 weeks old, both babies might sleep 10 hours consecutively throughout the night. 5. Understand the principle of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I see this in both of my kids. My son was able to sleep throughout the night consecutively for 8 hours as early as 7 weeks old, but then he falls back to needing the night feeding for a couple more nights and back to sleep throughout the night for 8 hours and more. This is very common during the different merges. The triggers for the merge are predictable. There are 7 major triggers over the course of the first year. First, the merge typically happens between weeks 3 to 6, middle of the night merging. Most babies start with 2 feedings during the middle of the night. PDF babies typically begin to merge the 2 middle night feedings into 1. For example, if your baby starts needing feedings roughly around 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., you start to merge that 2 into a single 3 a.m. middle of the night feed. Around weeks 3 to 6, most PDF babies sleep from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. and take a feed and sleep till 7 a.m. or so. Note, this merge will be delayed for premature babies. Now, night feedings become 8. Second merge typically happens between weeks 7 to 10. Most baby-wise babies drop their middle of the night feeding and begin sleeping 8 hours a night at this age. The baby will consume more milk during his daytime feedings, especially at the first morning feeding. By 5 weeks of age, most babies can extend their nighttime sleep by 1 hour for each week. The average healthy 5-week-old can handle a 5-hour stretch at night. A 7-week-old can handle a 7-hour stretch at night. Now, before babies are able to sleep throughout the night, mom has about 3 hours cycles to feed in a 24-hour day. Now the baby sleeps throughout the night for 8 hours. Subtracting the 8 from the 24-hour day, mom has 16 hours to feed the 7 feedings during the day. So the cycles become 2.5 hours long, and sometimes she has to feed less than 2.5 hours, considering growth spurts and the lower milk supply during late afternoons for most moms. Here are some strategies to cope with the second merge challenges. First, decide the first morning feeding time. Do you keep the original morning feeding time to start, or do you establish a new one? Note, if you decide to start morning feeding later, you could be pushing the late evening feeding to midnight. Regardless, schedule 7 feedings from the first morning to the late evening feeding. Don't forget the first to last principles. When reworking the baby's routine, feed the other 5 feed-wake sleep cycles between the first morning and the late evening feeding. Those 5 cycles do not have to be of equal length, and probably will not be. Some will be longer and some shorter, depends on what works best for the baby and mom. Note when the baby may need a little nudge because his internal sleep-wake clock is stuck. You will know this if he's waking within 5 minutes of the same time each night for 3 consecutive nights. 3 methods to handle this. You can allow the baby to resettle himself without mom or dad's direct intervention, possibly patting him on the back to let him know that you are there. Allow the baby to learn to resettle himself. Normally, after 3 or 4 nights with some crying, the sleep-wake clock adjusts, and the baby begins sleeping through to morning. Second method, push the late evening feeding closer to 11 p.m. or midnight. Once the baby is sleeping through to the first morning feeding, she can gradually back up the late evening feeding by 15 to 30 minute increments until the feeding is where mom wants it to be. Backward slide. This is the last resort. If the baby is constantly waking at 2 a.m. each night, preempt this nightly ritual by waking and feeding him 15 to 30 minutes earlier, around 1:30 a.m. In a couple days, moving the time back to 1 a.m., etc. The third merge is between weeks 10 to 15. This is when most baby-wise babies are capable of dropping their late evening feeding and begin sleeping 10 to 12 hours a night. The morning feeding time will remain the same, unless mom wants to change for her convenience. The last feeding will be fairly predictable because it falls 10 to 12 hours before the morning feeding. Keep in mind breastfeeding moms, especially the ones in their mid-30s or older, if you keep a baby to sleep longer than 10 hours a night, and this may not provide enough stimulation to maintain adequate milk supply. Assume the baby is sleeping 11 hours a night with first feeding at 7 a.m. and the last feeding at 8 p.m. Mom must schedule in 4 additional feedings during the day. Baby's wake times are significantly longer, although the length of naps may not increase from the last phase, since the baby is receiving a substantial amount of sleep at night. Note, having grown accustomed to sleeping all night, some parents are reluctant to drop the late evening feeding for fear that the baby will wake in the middle of the night. If your baby is showing a lack of interest or is difficult to awaken for his feeding, those are all good indicators that he is ready to drop it. Adjusting the other feeding times is the best way to drop this late evening feeding. If the late afternoon feeding is around 6 p.m., try feeding the baby again at 9:30 for a few nights, then moving 15 or 30 minutes earlier at 9 p.m. Continuously gradually adjust the time backward until you reach the desired time to put your baby to bed. This will make the last 2 feedings for the day less than 3 hours, which is okay providing the last feeding of the day is the priority. By week 12, wake times could be 6 minutes or longer. However, as wake times begin to lengthen, do not allow a wake-feed-sleep order to overtake the established feed-wake-sleep routine. The baby will have less energy to feed efficiently if feeding after playtime instead of after nap time. The feedings in the early months should follow after naps and not wake times. It is okay if this happens once or twice, but you should not allow it to become the new routine. The fourth merge typically happens between weeks 16 to 24. Baby-wise babies begin to extend their morning wake time by merging the early morning feeding and the mid-morning feeding. This is also the age to begin introducing solid foods to the baby, and that can also impact the timing of activities within the feed-wake-sleep cycles. Now, breastfeeding moms can offer additional dream feeding around 10:30 to 11 p.m. just to help mom who is mid-30s to maintain her milk supply. The fourth merge reduces the feed-wake-sleep cycles to 5 cycles. The dream feeding will make it 6 cycles to help breast stimulation. Merge 5 is between weeks 24 to 29 and happens due to solid foods and emergence of the catnap. A partial feed-wake-sleep transition begins to take place. It happens when the baby no longer needs the additional sleep of another full afternoon nap, but is not ready to go without a short rest between mid-afternoon nap and bedtime. Cat naps usually happen around late afternoon, usually around dinner time. Merge 6, catnap drop. Merge 6 is typically between week 28 and 40. Most PDF babies drop catnap, reduces the 5 feed-wake-sleep cycles to 4, and requires more daytime adjustments. The 4 cycles include breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a liquid feeding before bedtime. Note the large span of weeks separating merges 5 and 6. This is because some babies might still need their catnaps until 39 weeks, which is totally fine. You decide what works for your baby. Merge 7 is typically between weeks 46 and 52. The bedtime liquid feeding drop. This is when the baby no longer receives liquid feeding before bedtime. He might receive a bottle of formula, breast milk, or juice, but a bottle of milk is not necessary. Now we just reviewed the whole year's transitions and merges for the feed-wake-sleep cycles. Next, we're going to talk about some specific guidelines for the 3 activities for the first 12 weeks of a baby's life. Be mindful that babies are prone to snacking, but the breastfeed mom needs the stimulation that comes with full feedings. For newborn, feed time is their wake time. Feed and wake time is about 30 minutes, and the nap time about 1.5 and 2 hours. You get your 2.5 cycles for newborn. Around 3 weeks of age, the baby will extend the wake time to 30 minutes beyond the feeding. At around 6 weeks of age, they might further extend the wake times to 30 to 50 minutes, followed by the same 1.5 to 2 hour nap. By week 12, wake times could be 6 minutes or longer. However, as wake times begin to lengthen, do not allow a wake-feed-sleep order to overtake the established feed-wake-sleep routine. The baby will have less energy to feed efficiently if feeding after wake time instead of after nap time. Be mindful that you do not let any infant under 4 weeks of age to sleep longer than 4 hours. Always allow some flexibility to your baby's routines. In case of traveling, dropping at daycare, or occasionally visiting family or friends, parents can respond appropriately to adjust the routines for the benefits of everyone. Receiving early feedings or late feedings a few times a week will not ruin your baby's well-established routine, and your life will have less tense.